Good morning. It is Tuesday, June the 1st, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. My name's Ron, and I'm the only true conservative in the United States today. So I'm going to be reading the latest offering from the daily selection for spiritual warfare. Then we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the Star-Spangled Banner. I will answer the cries of my people. I am a God who loves to deliver my people. I delivered the children of Israel over and over again. I brought deliverance to my servant David when he sought me for his salvation. Just so I will answer your cries when you call upon me. Look to me, and I will deliver you from all of your fears. I will save you out of all of your troubles if you will bless me at all times and let praise to me be in your mouth continually. My deliverance to you is a sign of my great love and mercy for you. My love will never leave you, and my mercy will be extended to you forever. I will be near to you when your heart is broken and will deliver you out of all your afflictions. If you place your trust in me, you will never be condemned. Prayer declaration. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make its boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. For I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Amen. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. And let's see here. There we go. And now we're going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you, and now the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you, and that's absolutely gorgeous. I do the daily declaration for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner to remind us what it is exactly that we're fighting for. We're fighting for God, we're fighting for country, we're fighting for our families. When I come back, I'm going to be reading the latest installment of the book, Live Not by Lies. An excellent book, Live Not by Lies, and this is Chapter 7, Families Are Resistance Cells. Family is where we first learn to love others. If we are lucky, it is also where we first learn how to live in truth. And because the author here is, this is this section of the book that's about what do we do In the first part of the book, he was talking about what the problem is, and now he's talking about how do we solve the problem. And he says we do it by living in truth. Back to the book. The loosening of family ties and of traditional commitments to marriage has left Americans without the kind of refuge in the home that anti-communist dissidents had. U.S. Christians, alas, are not especially different from unbelievers. There's a strong model of anti-totalitarian resistance based in the Christian family. The Benda clan of Prague. The Bendas are a large Catholic family who suffered greatly in 1979 when the Czechoslovak state sentenced their patriarch Václav to 4 years in prison for his activities fighting for human rights. Václav Benda and his wife, Camilla, both academics, were among the only believing Christians working at the topmost level of the Czech dissident movement. It wasn't easy living as Christians in Prague back then, and not only because of the atheistic regime. In those days, Czechs and Slovaks were united in one state, but culturally they were distinct. Slovaks were intensely Catholic, and as an independent nation today, still remain one of the more devout European countries. Czechs have long been far more secular, and even though their country remains culturally conservative relative to Western European nations, it is second only to France as the most atheistic nation in Europe. The family and the totalitarian state. The underground Catholic Church was the main source of resistance here, a Slovak source told me. But over there, that is the Czech half, the Christian resistance was the Benda family. That's not literally true. There were other Catholic and Protestant Czech dissidents, even within the Charter 77 movement, which the Bendas helped lead. But the Slovaks' rhetorical exaggeration, nevertheless, says something about the esteem in which this one Prague family is held in the hearts and minds of many who fought communism in their country. Václav Benda, the father of 6 children, believed that the family is the bedrock of civilization. It must be nurtured and protected at all costs. He was acutely conscious of the threat communism posed to the family, and he thought deeply about the role of the traditional family that the traditional family should take in building anti-communist Christian resistance. As an aside here, this reminds me of Hillary Clinton, who wrote a book that says it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. No, it doesn't. It takes a family. Benda wrote a short essay titled A Family in the Totalitarian State, in which he explained his core beliefs and what must be done to help the family endure in the face of a government and a social order bent on its destruction. In the essay, Benda said that we must throw away the regular cliches about liberation from the traditional obligations of marriage and family. In the Christian model, marriage and family offers 3 gifts that are urgently needed for believers struggling within a totalitarian order. The first is the fruitful fellowship of love. The second gift is freedom. The third gift is the dignity of the individual within family fellowship. Benda was no utopian about the family. He acknowledged that families are all too human and filled with failure and weakness. In the past, though, the family could be dependent on the outside world to support its mission, and in turn, strong families produce citizens capable of building strong civil societies. It doesn't matter that it's filled with failure and weakness. The issue here is the family versus what, and which option is better. So it's the family in which you and I get to raise our kids, or we turn them over to the care of the state. In that case, the family is better. The state is still going to make mistakes. It's not going to do anything perfect, not by a long shot. So the family is better. That's the point, and should be the point. Traditional families, Christian and otherwise, living in the post-communist liberal capitalism of today know all too well that the left-wing assault on traditional marriage and family commenced in the West with the sexual revolution in the 60s. It commenced in the West, but it was a communist movement, so to speak. Now, the other thing is, he says the sexual revolution. In the 60s, there was no such thing. There was no such thing. There's people that talk confidently about the sexual revolution as though it was a thing. And it isn't. And it wasn't. It never existed. It was imaginary. It was psychologistic. And it was used as the basis from which the psychologism was used as the basis, a foundation from which to change other parts of our society. For instance, to create feminism, for instance. So it continues today in the form of direct attacks by the woke left, including law professors advocating legal structures that dismantle the traditional family as an oppressive institution. But it doesn't only come from the left. With the advance of consumerism and individualism, we have built a social ecosystem in which the function of the family has been reduced to producing autonomous consumers with no sense of connection or obligation to anything greater than fulfilling their own desires. That's because the family has been warped. This is what the left always does and brainwashes everybody else into doing, right? Is the left creates problems and then simply blames the other side. All these problems are because of capitalism. All these problems are because of conservatives. Bull crap. They're not. They come from the left. The left created these problems, and in an ideal world, the left would be forced to clean them up if they had to get down on their hands and knees with a toothbrush. So, and then as far as the family is concerned, it is the left that has encouraged parents not to be parents, but to be friends, and undermine the family, the authority of the family, and screw everything up. Back to the book. That's why Vaclav Benda's advice to families living under attack from totalitarian communism remains piercingly relevant to families today. The modern family will not hold together if the father and mother consider divorce an easy solution to marriage's difficulties. And again, that's from the left. That was one of the feminism arguments. They started with the fiction of male hegemony, that men rule the world, that they're inherently oppressive, and that women need to rise up and throw men off as their masters and kind of strike out on their own. And as part of that was no-fault divorce. The idea was women would be able to, if their husbands were abusive, coming home drunk, they could just go out and get a divorce, and they don't have to worry about coming up with reasons for it. Easy out. The problem is it didn't work for women. It ended up working for men. Irresponsible, sexually promiscuous men found it great, because then when their wives were getting up into their 40s and the man's 20-year-old secretary looks pretty good, he simply divorces his wife and marries his secretary. So that backfired. And there's a reason we had these ideas in place, that you have a nuclear family, that you make it difficult to get a divorce. We had damn good reasons for them. Okay? Excuse me. And take marriage seriously. Now it's just big deal. We'll go ahead and get married, and if it doesn't work out, we'll go ahead and get a divorce kind of a situation. That's not what it's supposed to be about. That's so much for the idea of the modern family. Sometimes these things appear in family life because of individual moral failures, and sometimes they manifest because of external conditions, both economic and social. Let me see. And though a strong leader within his own family, Benda grasped that the Christian father must above all be a servant of Christ. The church has to be the ultimate foundation then in society. So the family, yes, but not a family without the church, without God and without Christ. Benda said that the family house must be a real home, that is, a place which is livable and set apart, sheltered from the outside world, a place which is a starting out point for adventures and experiences with the assurances of a safe return. In other words, a haven in the heartless world. When the nation and its people are held captive by a totalitarian order, then Christians and their families must push as hard against the totalitarian world as it pushes against them. Benda survived to see the fall of communism in 1989, and his friend and close collaborator Václav Havel became the first president of a free Czechoslovakia, and then presided over the peaceful separation of the Czech and Slovak nations. Benda stayed active in Czech politics until his death in 1999. His widow, Camilla, still lives in the book-lined Prague apartment where, under communism, she and her husband hosted seminars for dissidents. A Benda Guide to Child Raising. I first visited Camilla in the family's Prague apartment in the spring of 2018 to pay my respects to the memory of her late husband. That Sunday evening, I learned that Václav and Camilla had not only raised children who kept the Christian faith under communist persecution, but also that their brood stayed faithful after communism, even though the overwhelming majority of their fellow Czechs had turned their backs on God. The Benda family apartment is near the former headquarters of the state police. the communist era's secret police. Under the dictatorship, people who had been summoned for interrogation would sometimes stop at the Bendas for advice on how to endure what was about to come without breaking and to receive encouragement. Those same people would stop at the apartment for comfort after their ordeal. On that first visit and in 2 subsequent meetings with the family members, I was eager to learn how they had led their families to build up the inner strength of their children, not only as faithful Catholics, but also as young people who understood the meaning of their parents' mission and the sacrifices it would necessarily entail. Our parents were heroes for us, says Patrick. My father was the sheriff from High Noon movie. Vaclav often taught his children how to read the world around them and how to understand people and events in terms of right and wrong. He did not allow them to drift into ignorance or indifference. And that's the key. That's a really key part of the paragraph there is understanding people and events in terms of right and wrong. We're not doing that in our society anymore. What we're doing is understanding people and events in terms of power. When you look around now and see what's going on in the news, like especially say at Coca-Cola, with this white boy re-education camp crapola, that has nothing to do with right and wrong and everything to do with might makes right and the ends justify the means, which is just pure power. So, watching how his brothers behaved in their adolescent years revealed to Patrick how much moral authority his father had within the family. All the arguments within the family had to be put aside so we could stand against the outside threat from communism. Rather than regarding this as a heavy yoke, the Benda kids saw it as an opportunity to serve something greater than themselves. Screening High Noon and movies like it for their children wasn't the only way that Vaclav and Camilla Benda prepared them for Christian resistance. She read them fairy tales, myths, adventure stories, and even some horror classics. More than any other novel, though, The Lord of the Rings was a cornerstone of her family's collective imagination. So again, this goes to the influence that our culture, particularly the arts, whether it's novels or television or movies, can have on families and on our culture. Now, there's like a huge difference, and one of the things that a true conservative needs to do is whatever you're watching, listen to your conscience. If your conscience is telling you, I don't, something's not quite right here, don't dismiss that. Try to figure out what it is about this movie or television show or whatever it is you're reading bothers you. One of the, for example, Breaking Bad, 2 of the most acclaimed series in television was Breaking Bad and Burn Notice. And both of them were horrible. They were awful, absolutely abysmal productions, television shows. They were well written, damn well acted, damn well technical qualities, the filming, the special effects, all of that was damn good. But they were malevolent universe oriented. They both said that the universe is a horrible, scary, awful place. You never know what's coming, and failure is to be expected. And in the ending of both of those series, everybody did fail. And not only that, but then in the case of Breaking Bad, there was nobody in that series that was worth rooting for. You didn't root for anyone. They were all crappy people in one way, shape, or form. They're all crap bags. And so it leaves you with a dirty taste in your mouth. But they were terrible movies. Now, does that mean that you should, I'm telling you, in order to be a true conservative, you have to avoid? No. Listen to that little voice in your head, because that's what was happening to me. I'm watching this, and it's very engaging. It brings you in. The storytelling is fantastic. The acting is fantastic. The camera work is fantastic. The writing is fantastic. So you're sucked in to this. But there's that little voice in my head that says, I don't know, something about this something about this bothers me. So it took a few weeks for me to figure it out. And realized that, again, it was just negative. It was unrealistic. The left always likes to accuse the right of being unrealistic when it comes to art. And as a matter of fact, the left is the one that's actually unrealistic. And so I figured out what about it is that was bothering me, that it was just a bad series. And you can do that yourself. Watch something and listen to that little voice in your head. Is there bells going off? Is there, is your conscience telling you something's wrong? Another thing you can do is watch something that's modern, let's say Breaking Bad, and then contrast it with something that was a TV show that was written and produced in the 50s or 60s. And look at the difference, particularly with police shows, right? So you can watch whatever's the latest police show on TV, and then watch a segment of that or an episode, and then watch an episode of, say, Adam 12 or Dragnet or Highway Patrol or something of that nature. And look at the differences in terms of how people are portrayed. How are police officers portrayed? Okay, how are the bad guys portrayed? So don't think that being a true conservative means you must shun certain types of entertainment unless you're asked to by God, by Christ, by the church. Porn, for instance. Let's see, back to the book. Mom read Lord of the Rings to us maybe 6 times, recalls Philip Benda. It's about the East versus the West, the elves on one side and the goblins on the other. And when you know the book, you see that you first need to fight the evil empire, but that's not the end of the war. Afterward, you have to solve the problems at home within the Shire. In our classes at school, where we were different through our faith, but also through our clothes. We had more variety of our clothing because something came from our aunt or someone who gave us our clothing. We were not hurt by being different because we considered this exceptionality has value and isn't something bad. So I'm going to leave it there for the time being, and back in a minute. Thank you. So, excellent book, Live Not by Lies. I think it becomes a little bit obscure because of his constant references to Poland, Czechoslovakia, the former Iron Curtain countries. That's what they used to call them. So, first of all, Europe is a very different place than the United States of America. And not just in terms of the language, but in terms of what the United States is. The United States, properly understood, really isn't a nation. Nations are groups of people that are similar in terms of their culture, their bloodlines are very close and similar, and they speak the same language, and it's much more tight-knit. The United States of America is the first country that was created based on an idea rather than on DNA. Nationalism is the idea that nation states should remain separate. So you would have Germany for the Germans, France for the French, and the Czech Republic for the Czechs, the Slovakia for the Slovakians, that kind of thing. So it's very, very culturally oriented. You had the same problem when Yugoslavia fell apart. Then you had all the ethnic tensions. They reconstituted back into their Montenegro and Slovenia and etc. And they had the same old ethnic tensions that they had prior to World War II and the communism and the Soviet Union. So in the United States, we're based on an idea. That's why anybody can be an American. Anybody from around the world that comes here, you learn about the Constitution, you fulfill the requirements for citizenship, boom, you're a citizen. That's all there is to it. You don't have to have a certain bloodline. It isn't America for the Americans, because technically American is, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to explain. I guess just a concept or an idea. So anybody can be an American, whereas not just anybody can be Slovakian, not anybody can be Czech. And that difference makes all of his analogies, using these Iron Curtain countries as analogies, rather clumsy. So, but enough of it comes through to whereas that he makes his point that you need the church as your basic foundation. On top of that is the family. And so you always have to be aware of anybody in this country that is trying to undermine the church and or undermine the family. One of the ways that the left has successfully undermined the family is by making parents friends. Okay, they come out, and first of all, and with the sexual revolution, this nonsense, this fiction called the sexual revolution. No such thing occurred. If anybody wants to challenge that, then what you need to do is explain to me who it is that started the sexual revolution and exactly where the sexual revolution started. Okay, and you can't. There's no answer to that. Somebody on the news started talking about the sexual revolution. Maybe somebody else suggested it to them or whatever, but they started talking about the sexual revolution as though it was a real thing. And so everybody else, nobody wants to admit they don't know or that they're behind the times. What? You mean there's a sexual revolution going on and I don't know about it? Well, I can't admit that to anybody. So I just go along with it. Oh, well, yes, the sexual revolution. But that was used as the basis for changing other parts of our society, changing our families, and changing the way we approach the family. For instance, the idea of being friends with your kids instead of being a parent, a disciplinarian, and somebody that your kids can look up to and respect because of your experience. That's perhaps even more important than being the disciplinarian is the benefit of having the experience of your parents who can guide you through. When you're having tough times, you should be able to go to your parents, sit down and saying, things in school are tough for me, things in, socially, or maybe they're tough academically, whatever the case may be, and your parents can sit down and say, you know what, I've been there. That's very, very, very important. And then your kids look up to you. They're respectable. Otherwise, all you end up being is the chauffeur, the maid, the butler, etc. And you get no respect from your kids. And then when they come back from college, then they're really treating you like dirt. And nobody wants that. Nobody needs that. So another thing that I wanted to, as a matter of fact, let me just, when I come back, I'm going to be talking a little bit about current events. Thank you. Current events-wise, there's been shootings that are going on. I mentioned this yesterday, but shootings and lots of violence in various places. There was apparently was it Florida or was it here in California where they had it's hard to keep up with all the violence that's going on. And I noticed that there wasn't that kind of thing as going on as much with President Trump as there is with old Joe. But anyway, so you had 3 people jump out of a car, and there was people at a party. They sprayed the place with bullets. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking again, I place the blame at the feet of Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi. They're the ones that are always calling for violence. They don't come out and use the word violence. They use dog whistles. They use code words like confrontation, get in their face, that type of thing. And you go confront these people, make sure that they're not comfortable going anywhere, going to dinner, going to lunch or whatever. But that basically all they're calling for is violence. It's just a dog whistle or a code word for violence. But in order to be effective about this, you can't wait until after the violence has occurred to come out and say, guess what, it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. Because then that's not going to work very well. It's going to be ignored as just partisan politics. The way to make this work is when the next time you hear Nancy Pelosi or Maxine Waters or anybody on the left that is talking about confrontation, talking about getting in people's faces, that's the point at which to make the prediction and to come out and demand a retraction from this person. Let's say it's Maxine Waters demanding that people get into the face of their whomever and you say Maxine Waters needs to retract that statement. She needs to apologize immediately for it, because if any other violence occurs, it will be on her head. Then, when a mass shooting occurs, then you can say, I told you so. Because that's exactly what the left does. The left runs around and prepares, they deal themselves some cards, let's put it that way. And they do it by talking about we're awash in guns, there's too many guns in our society. Then when a shooting happens, they say, see, we told you we're awash in guns. So it makes it look like there's a connection between guns and the gun violence. Okay, and then usually conservatives are sitting on their heels trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? Because you know that it's not true, but the left has already got a considerable amount of psychological momentum. Well, this is how we fight back. Okay, the next time you hear somebody on the left that is giving the business and trying to encourage people to be violent, even though they may be using code words or dog whistles, then immediately you need to call them on that. You can do it on Twitter, you can do it on Facebook, you can do it wherever, verbally with your friends and relatives, and say immediately, if there's any future violence, it's her fault. It's Nancy Pelosi's fault, it's Maxine Waters' fault, and I'm holding them accountable. Then when that violence occurs, then you can go out and say, see, I told you so. They're the reason we have a violent society. We demand that they resign. We demand that they be investigated and thrown out of office. Back in a minute. Thank you. That brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And always remember to be honest, be smart, and be beautiful. And we do so because it's a benevolent universe. God smiles on us each and every day. Remember that the left cannot win. They have no authority, no power, and they cannot win.